Welcome to your virtual tour of the Air Force Museum's Cold War Gallery. You will see videos and photos of Cold War aircraft along with commentary on these historic planes. Radio planes OQ-19D was a fast aerial target used to train anti-aircraft gunners. Ryan's AQM-34N was a reconnaissance drone that operated above 60,000 feet, had a range exceeding 2,400 miles and incorporated several maneuverability and stealth-like systems that reduced its vulnerability to interceptors and surface-to-air missiles. Ryan's BQM-34 Firebee was a high-speed target drone used primarily for testing newly developed missiles and for training pilots flying missile-armed aircraft. Boeing's YCGM-121B Seek Spinner is an unmanned aerial vehicle designed to seek and attack the radars that control enemy anti-aircraft artillery or surface-to-air missile defenses. Lockheed's D-21 was a highly advanced, remotely piloted aircraft designed to carry out high-speed, high-altitude strategic reconnaissance missions over hostile territory. D-21Bs were used on 4 flights over Communist China under the code name Senior Bull, but none of these missions fully succeeded. Northrop Grumman's RQ-4 Global Hawk aerial system provides commanders the near real-time reconnaissance imagery they need to defeat an enemy halfway around the world. A typical, pre-programmed Global Hawk mission can include a 1,200-mile flight to an area of interest, 24 hours flying over the area, and the flight back to base. General Atomics MQ-9 Reaper is a long-endurance remotely piloted aircraft with a primary mission of locating and destroying time-critical and highly mobile targets. In addition to this hunter-killer mission, the Reaper also provides real-time intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance to military commanders. General Atomics Aeronautical Systems RQ-1 Predator UAV provided military commanders with an intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance platform capable of flying over dangerous areas for extended periods without risk to a human pilot. The equipment carried in the bottom turret can provide live video, still photographs, or radar imagery in all weather conditions, day or night, and this content can be shared instantly with commanders around the world. Lockheed U-2 was a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft that operated beginning in the 1950s by both the Air Force and the Central Intelligence Agency. It gathered intelligence day and night from high altitude and during all weather conditions. Lockheed's SR-71, unofficially known as the Blackbird, is a long-range, advanced, strategic reconnaissance aircraft. Throughout its nearly 24-year career, the SR-71 remained the world's fastest and highest-flying operational aircraft. The Air Force acquired 8 surplus Navy Grumman J-2 F-6s and redesignated them OA-12 Ducks. Cessna's LC-126 was a light utility transport aircraft that served the 10th Rescue Squadron at Elmendorf Air Force Base. Cessna's U-3A is a light administrative liaison, cargo and utility transport. The Air Force employed de Havilland U-6A Beavers primarily for aeromedical evacuation in the Korean and Southeast Asia Wars. During the Korean War, the Grumman's HU-16B Albatross rescued almost 1,000 United Nations personnel from coastal waters and rivers, often behind enemy lines. They also made numerous dramatic and hazardous rescues in Southeast Asia, on occasion taxiing many miles over rough, open water when unable to take off. Flying at low and medium altitudes over Iraq and Afghanistan, Hawker Beechcraft MC-12 Liberty crews spotted more than 650 enemy weapons caches and aided in stopping more than 8,000 terrorists. Liberty crews flew more than 400,000 combat hours helping ground troops find enemy forces and avoid improvised explosive devices. Beginning in 1939, nearly 75% of the primary trainers in the U.S. government civilian pilot training program were Piper J-3s. During World War II, Civil Air Patrol members, flying their personal aircraft such as the J-3, hunted for enemy submarines along the U.S. coasts, reported damaged ships, towed aerial targets, and delivered high-priority orders of vital war materials. North American's T-28 Trojan offered higher performance and required less maintenance than its predecessor. They served as the Air Force primary trainer between 1950 and 1955. Lockheed's T-33 Shooting Star trained qualified propeller-driven aircraft pilots on the art of flying jet aircraft. It was also used for such tasks as drone director and target towing. The Air Force used the Beech T-34A Mentor for primary flight training beginning in 1954. It remained the standard primary trainer until the introduction of the Cessna T-37 jet trainer starting in 1957. Cessna's T-37 Tweet is a primary trainer used for teaching the fundamentals of jet aircraft operation and for instrument flying, flying in formation, and flying at night. The Tweet's side-by-side seating made it easy for the instructor to observe and communicate with the student. The Air Force originally ordered the Northrop T-38A Talon in the 1950s as an advanced, supersonic flight trainer. Modified with a weapons pylon and a gun sight, the Talon could carry gun pods, rockets or practice bombs, and trainee pilots learned basic combat maneuvers and air-to-ground weapons delivery in them. Cessna's T-41 trainer was a standard Cessna Model 172 light general aviation aircraft purchased off the shelf by the Air Force for preliminary flight screening of Air Force pilot candidates. Boeing introduced the tanker version of the C-97 as the KC-97 Stratofreighter with the flying boom refueling system in 1950. The Air Force gradually replaced the slower Stratofreighters with Boeing KC-135 jet tankers after 1956. Boeing WB-50D Superfortresses were equipped for long-range weather reconnaissance missions with high-altitude atmospheric samplers, Doppler radar, weather radar and a bomb bay fuel tank for extended range. The Air Force flew them between 1953 and 1955. When they were turned over to the all-weather service. The RF-84K was a reconnaissance and nuclear strike fighter that was intended to be carried toward a target as a parasite underneath the GRB-36 bomber beginning in 1952. By 1957, the development of more capable strategic reconnaissance aircraft, along with dependable aerial refueling extending their range, made the parasite aircraft concept obsolete. North American's RF-86F Haymaker Sabre filled an important reconnaissance gap until more capable aircraft became available. They secretly overflew Soviet, North Korean and Communist Chinese territory in the mid-1950s. Flying in radio silence at night along and sometimes over the border of the Soviet Union and other communist nations, Boeing's RB-47H Stratojets collected essential intelligence about the size and capability of Soviet air defense radar networks. They remained in service until the more capable RC-135 replaced them in the mid-1960s. Beginning in 1956, Martin's RB-57D was a strategic reconnaissance aircraft that could fly high enough to avoid interception. The Air Force stopped using it as a strategic reconnaissance aircraft in 1960, but some continued flying weather reconnaissance, atomic air sampling and air defense training missions until the last aircraft was retired in 1970. McDonnell Douglas RF-4C Phantom IIs carried a variety of cameras in 3 different stations in its nose section, taking photos at both high and low altitude, day or night. RF-4Cs flew reconnaissance missions around the world, including Southeast Asia and Desert Shield Desert Storm in Iraq. Air Force Special Operations Forces used the Sikorsky MH-53M PAVE Low-4 to covertly enter enemy territory. Capable of operating day or night or in bad weather, these helicopters conducted long-range, low-level missions to insert, extract, and resupply Special Operations Forces. Bell Boeing CV-22 Osprey is a tiltrotor aircraft that merges the vertical takeoff, hover and vertical landing qualities of a helicopter with the long range, fuel efficiency and speed characteristics of a turboprop aircraft. Its mission is to conduct long-range infiltration, exfiltration and resupply missions for Special Operations Forces. Douglas's C-133 Cargo Master was a large-capacity strategic cargo aircraft. With its rear loading and side loading doors, it could handle a wide variety of military cargo. The Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II is the first Air Force aircraft designed specifically for close air support of ground forces. It is very maneuverable at low speeds and low altitudes to ensure accurate weapons delivery, and carries the systems and armor needed to survive in this environment. Lockheed's AC-130A Spectre is a C-130 converted to a gunship, primarily for night attacks against ground targets. It used various sensors, a target acquisition system, and infrared and low-light television systems for accurate identification and targeting of adversaries. The all-weather Avro CF-100 Canuck was the only Canadian-designed and Canadian-built fighter to go into large-scale production. In 1957, the two-seat Canuck became an integral part of the newly formed U.S.-Canadian North American air defense system, protecting the continent from potential Soviet bomber attack across the North Pole. North American's F-82 Twin Mustang was the last propeller-driven fighter acquired in quantity by the Air Force. The Twin Mustang carried a pilot and co-pilot navigator to reduce fatigue on long-range bomber escort missions. Japan-based F-82Gs were among the first U.S. Air Force aircraft to operate over Korea. Deliveries of Republic's F-84 Thunderstreak began in 1954, with most of the aircraft going to the Tactical Air Command as a ground support fighter bomber. Through the late 1950s, the Air Force replaced its F-84Fs with supersonic F-100s, and the Thunderstreaks went to Air National Guard units. North American's F-86D Sabre was the first production single-seat fighter to have air-to-air missiles rather than the classic gun armament. Its interception radar and associated fire control computed the target's position, guided the aircraft on an intercept course to within 500 yards of the target, lowered the retractable tray of 24 rockets, and fired the rockets automatically. North American's F-86H Sabre represented the practical application of knowledge gained from the thousands of combat missions flown by the earlier F-86 variants. Primarily a fighter bomber, the F-86H was larger and heavier than its predecessors, but it had better all-around performance. Although never used in combat, it provided the Air Force with a formidable fighter-bomber aircraft until the arrival of the supersonic F-100. Northrop designed the F-89 Scorpion as an all-weather fighter interceptor for the Air Defense Command. With the radar operator in the rear seat guiding the pilot, the F-89 could locate, intercept and destroy enemy aircraft by day or night under all types of weather conditions. On July 19, 1957, an F-89 fired a Genie test rocket with a nuclear warhead, and it detonated over a Nevada test range, marking the first launch of an air-to-air rocket with a nuclear warhead. Lockheed's F-94 Starfires were the first all-jet, all-weather interceptors employed in the air defense of the continental United States. 24 rockets were carried in the nose around the radome, shielded by retractable doors, with an additional 24 in the wing pods, if installed. North American's F-100 Super Sabre was the world's first production airplane capable of flying faster than the speed of sound in level flight. Its combat debut was in Vietnam, where it was used as a fighter bomber in ground support missions such as attacking bridges, road junctions, and troop concentrations. McDonnell's F-101 Voodoo was a two-seat all-weather interceptor that became operational in January 1959. It had an MA-7 fire control radar for both air-to-air and air-to-ground use, augmented by a low-altitude bombing system for delivering nuclear weapons. Convair's F-102 Delta Dagger was the world's first supersonic all-weather jet interceptor and the Air Force's first operational Delta Wing aircraft. At the peak of deployment in the late 1950s, Delta Daggers equipped more than 25 Air Defense Command squadrons. Lockheed's F-104 Starfighter was produced in two versions. Armed with a 6-barrel M61 20mm Vulcan cannon, it served as a tactical fighter, and when equipped additionally with heat-seeking Sidewinder missiles, as a day-night interceptor. Convair's F-106 Delta Dart used a Hughes MA-1 electronic guidance and fire control system. After takeoff, the MA-1 can control the aircraft, fly it to the proper altitude and attack position, fire the Genie and Falcon missiles, break off the attack run and return the aircraft to the vicinity of its base. General Dynamics F-111 Aardvark was a long-range, all-weather strike aircraft capable of navigating at low level to destroy targets deep in enemy territory. It was one of the most effective Allied aircraft in Operation Desert Storm, flying more than 2,400 sorties against Iraqi strategic sites, vehicle formations and hardened bunkers. Lockheed's F-117A Nighthawk was the world's first operational stealth aircraft. During Operation Desert Storm, they flew 1,271 sorties, achieving an 80% mission success rate, and suffered no losses or battle damage. McDonnell Douglas's F-4 Wild Weasel's mission was to attack enemy air defenses, including surface-to-air missile air defense radars. It carried a pilot and an electronic warfare officer, who navigated, assisted with communications and coordinated attacks on the surface-to-air missile sites. McDonnell Douglas's F-15 Eagle is a twin-engine, high-performance, all-weather air superiority fighter. F-15C, D, and E models participated in Operation Desert Storm in 1991, accounting for 32 of 36 Air Force's air-to-air victories while also attacking Iraqi ground targets. Lockheed Martin's F-22 Raptor is the world's first stealthy air dominance fighter. The Raptor merges stealth maneuverability and the ability to fly long distances at supersonic speeds, or supercruise, in performance of air superiority and air-to-ground missions. At the start of Operation Desert Storm, Panavia Tornado GR-1 aircraft attacked Iraqi air bases at low level with anti-runway weapons and suppressed enemy air defenses. Flying more than 1,500 operational sorties, mostly at night, Royal Air Force GR-1 aircrews played an important role in forcing the Iraqis out of Kuwait. The MiG-19 was the Soviet Union's primary fighter during the last half of the 1950s. The Soviet Union phased them out in the early 1960s in favor of the more advanced MiG-21, but other nations continued to use them for many more years. The Soviet-built MiG-23 Flogger with its advanced radar and fire control system could fire missiles at targets beyond visual range. Variable swing wing geometry and robust landing gear allowed the Flogger to operate from short, remote runways. The pilot could select the wing sweep for low-speed takeoff and landing or for supersonic flight. The MiG-29 presented a formidable threat to Western pilots as it could detect a target more than 60 miles away due to infrared tracking sensors and a laser rangefinder allowing a pilot to track and shoot at opposition aircraft at long distances. Also, the pilot would simply turn his head toward a target, and the helmet aimed the missile's sensors toward the target, a great advantage at close range. In June 1948, the Strategic Air Command received its first operational Convair B-36 Peacemaker, a strategic bomber with intercontinental range. Although never used in combat, the Peacemaker was a major deterrent to enemy aggression. Convair's B-58 Hustler was the Air Force's first operational supersonic bomber. Since the thin fuselage prevented the carrying of bombs internally, a droppable, two-component pod beneath the fuselage contained a nuclear weapon, along with extra fuel, reconnaissance equipment or other specialized gear. Boeing's B-1B Lancer's blended wing-body configuration, variable geometry design and turbofan engines combine to provide greater range and high speed, more than 900 miles per hour at sea level. Able to update target information in flight, the Lancer could deliver weapons precisely in a changing combat environment. Northrop's B-2 Spirit is virtually invisible to even the most sophisticated air defense radar systems. Spirits demonstrated their combat capabilities in Operation Allied Force over Serbia in 1999, Operation Enduring Freedom over Afghanistan in 2001, and Operation Iraqi Freedom over Iraq in 2003. I hope you enjoyed this tour of the museum's post-Vietnam era aircraft. If you would like to tour other galleries in this series, convenient links are listed in the description section below this video.